Ma'am, step away from the man. Right now, hands where I can see them. The voice was granite, a wall of command that sliced through the afternoon calm of the Boston public garden. Ella Blackwell froze, her hand halfway to the old man's shoulder. Officer Cole Dalton's hand was already on his holstered weapon. A small, ugly crowd was forming, phones held up like digital pitchforks. "I'm just helping him," Ella said, her voice trembling but low. He's a friend." Dalton's eyes were like chips of ice. "Friends don't usually meet in a park so you can help them out of their wallet. Step back." The bench was their spot. Weathered green paint, facing the lagoon, just far enough from the swan boat launch to afford a measure of peace. This was where Ella Blackwell found Ryan Hawthorne 3 weeks and 2 days ago, on a Tuesday that smelled of damp earth and impending rain. Ella's life was a study in controlled motion. Mornings were a blur of anatomy charts and pharmacology lectures at the UMass Boston nursing program. Afternoons were spent at the Gilded Bean in Back Bay, a high-end cafe where she pulled espresso shots for people who wore $500 shoes and complained about the foam. Evenings were a long subway ride back to her shared Dorchester apartment, microwaved dinners, and studying until her eyes burned. She was 22, perpetually tired, and carrying the twin weights of student debt and the quiet, constant vigilance required of a young black woman in a city that was both liberal and deeply, historically stratified. That first day, Ryan had been a sound before he was a person, a dry, hacking cough that rattled in his chest. Ella's nursing instincts, honed by countless hours in simulation labs, took over. She found him doubled over, his face pale and clammy. She sat, not too close, and spoke in the calm, measured tone she used with anxious patients. "Sir, my name is Ella. I'm a nursing student. Are you having trouble breathing?" He looked up, his eyes a startling, clear blue, clouded with confusion and grief. A profound, bottomless grief she recognized instantly. It was the same look she saw in her own mother's eyes for a year after her father died. "Clara?" he'd whispered, his hand reaching out. "No, sir. My name is Ella." She gently took his hand. It was frail, all paper skin and bone, but his grip was surprisingly strong. She checked his pulse. A little thready. "Let's just take a deep breath. In through your nose, and out through your mouth. That's it." She stayed with him for 20 minutes, talking about the ducks on the water until his breathing evened out and the color returned to his face. He didn't say much. He just watched her. He was there the next day. And the next. A routine was born. She'd stop by after her shift at the Bean, always with a small paper bag. A lukewarm coffee, he liked it not too hot, and a plain scone. He never had any money, or at least he never offered. She didn't care. It was a 15-minute island of peace in her frantic day. Their conversations were strange, fragmented. He was clearly wealthy. His shoes were worn but made of expensive, soft leather, and his watch, though scratched, was an old Patek Philippe. Yet he seemed utterly alone. He'd talk about the board and Q3 projections, then pivot to asking if she'd seen the yellow-rumped warbler. He still called her Clara half the time. "Clara always loved the willows," he'd say, staring at the trees. "She sounds wonderful, Ryan," Ella would reply, making a mental note. Possible dementia with periods of lucidity, grief-induced confusion. She was... His voice would trail off. She was the whole equation. Ella learned to just be, to sit and listen. She was his anchor. He'd get agitated by the crowds, and she'd guide his attention back to the water. "Look at that swan, Ryan. He's really paddling hard, isn't he?" Sometimes, he'd be sharp as a tack. The market is over-leveraged, Ella. Don't let your debt sit in variable rates. Consolidate. I'll remember that, Ryan, she'd say with a small smile. She became fiercely protective of him. She saw how people looked at him, a frail old man talking to himself on a bench. She saw how they looked at her, a young black woman sitting too close to a vulnerable old white man, the suspicion in their polite, sideways glances, the way mothers would pull their children a little closer. Ella was used to it. She met their stares with a calm neutrality that cost her more energy than her 12-hour days. Yesterday, he had been particularly frail. As she helped him stand up to go home, though he never said where that was, a small amber prescription bottle fell from his pocket. She picked it up. Metoprolol. 25 milligrams. A common beta blocker. He hadn't even noticed. She'd tucked it into her backpack, planning to return it today. He shouldn't be wandering around without this, she'd thought, a spike of real worry cutting through her fatigue. Which led to today. Friday. The sun was high. The garden was packed. She'd just finished a brutal shift. The espresso machine had broken, and a tourist had yelled at her for 10 minutes about the price of a muffin. She was tired, her feet ached. But she saw Ryan on the bench, and a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Hey, Ryan, I brought you that scone you like." "Clara," he breathed, his face lighting up. "You came." "It's Ella, Ryan, and I have something for you. You dropped this yesterday." She pulled the prescription bottle from her backpack. "You need to be more careful with this, okay?" She was trying to press it into his palm when the shadow fell over them. "Ma'am, step away from the man. Right now, hands where I can see them." Ella looked up, squinting into the sun. Officer Cole Dalton was tall, broad, and wore his uniform like armor. His face was a mask of righteous certainty. "Officer? What's wrong?" "I said, step back." He unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, I have a potential 240, assault and robbery in the public garden. Elderly male, white. Suspect is a black female, early 20s. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, washed over Ella. "Robbery? Officer, you don't understand. I'm his friend. I'm a nursing student. I was giving him his medication." "His medication?" Dalton laughed, a short, ugly bark. "That's a new one. Empty your pockets. And that bag, now." Ryan was getting agitated, his frail body tensing. "Clara, what's happening? Tell this man to leave us. He's frightening me." Dalton looked at Ryan, his voice softening into a grotesque, patronizing coo. "It's okay, sir. We're here to help. This woman won't bother you anymore." He turned back to Ella, his face hardening. "I'm not asking again. Give me the bag." "You have no right," Ella started, but the words died in her throat. She knew this script. Arguing was resisting. Resisting was escalating. Escalating was danger. Slowly she took her backpack off. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a rhythm of pure, hot injustice. The crowd was filming. She could see the little red dots of recording phones. "He's grabbing my arm," she said, her voice loud and clear for the cameras. "Officer, you are hurting me." Dalton's grip tightened. "Stop resisting, ma'am." "I am not resisting," she said, each word precise and cold. "I am being assaulted." The world shrank to the 6-foot circle of pavement around the bench. The distant laughter of children, the quacking of ducks, the rumble of traffic on Beacon Street. It all faded into a dull roar, replaced by the thumping in Ella's ears and the hot, metallic taste of adrenaline. "On the bench, now," Dalton ordered, yanking her backpack from her shoulder. The strap caught on her hair, pulling it painfully. "Please," Ella said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "He's my friend. His name is Ryan. Just ask him." Dalton shot a glance at Ryan, who was now rocking back and forth, his hands over his ears. Clara, make it stop. See, Dalton said, a sneer twisting his lips. You're upsetting him. He doesn't even know your name. You're probably targeting all the confused old men in this park. He turned her bag upside down. The contents spilled onto the dusty ground with a sickening, public clatter. There, for the world to see, was her life. Her UMass Boston ID card, her advanced pathophysiology textbook, its cover bent, a highlighter, a half-eaten granola bar, a crumpled-up apron from the Gilded Bean, smelling faintly of coffee grounds. Her keys, a cheap wallet containing $17 and a Market Basket rewards card. And the prescription bottle. Dalton snatched it up. Metoprolol, he read aloud, as if confirming her guilt. Stealing prescription medication from a senior citizen. That's a felony, sweetheart. You're in a lot of trouble. I wasn't stealing it, Ella's voice finally cracked. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from her chest to her face. She could feel the stares of the crowd, their judgment. They saw exactly what Dalton wanted them to see. A young black woman, a thug, preying on a helpless old white man. The story wrote itself. He dropped it yesterday, she insisted, her voice thick. I was bringing it back to him. I'm a nursing student. Look at my ID. Look at my book. Dalton picked up her textbook, weighed it in his hand, and tossed it back on the pile. Anybody can buy a book, and anybody can print a fake ID. That's a UMass state ID, she cried. You can scan it. And what about this? Dalton said, poking at her wallet with his foot. How much cash did you lift from him before I got here? That's my tip money. Right, tip money. He crouched down, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled like stale coffee. Here's what I think happened. I think you saw an easy mark. I think you've been cozying up to him, and today you decided to take his pills and his cash. And I think I caught you red-handed. That's not true. That is not what happened. Tell it to the judge. He pulled out his handcuffs. The sound of the ratchet, the cold click as the steel met her wrist, was the loudest sound she had ever heard. It was a sound of finality, a sound that separated before from after. You are making a mistake, Ella whispered, the tears finally coming, hot and angry. You are making a terrible mistake. Yeah, well, that's what they all say. He yanked her to her feet by the cuff, wrenching her shoulder. The crowd murmured. A woman's voice cut through. Shameful, preying on the elderly. Dalton seemed to swell, feeding on the crowd's approval. He was the hero of this story. He was the protector. He paraded her past the swanboat dock, past the Make Way for Ducklings statues, toward his cruiser parked on Charles Street. Each step was a fresh wave of shame. She saw a mother cover her young daughter's eyes. Ryan was still on the bench, a small, lost figure. A different officer, a woman, was now kneeling in front of him, speaking to him in a loud, slow voice, as if he were a child. He was ignoring her, his gaze fixed on Ella's retreating back. His face was a mask of pure terror. Clara, he wailed, a thin, desperate sound that pierced through the noise. Clara, don't leave me! Ella's head snapped around. Ryan, it's okay, I'll be... Be quiet, Dalton growled, shoving her forward. Don't talk to the victim. I am not. He is not. But it was useless. The narrative was set, hardened in the concrete of systemic bias and public opinion. Dalton pushed her head down, that classic demeaning gesture, and folded her into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, sealing her in a world of plastic and stale sweat. As they pulled away, she saw 2 EMTs arriving. They were strapping Ryan onto a gurney. He wasn't fighting, but his hands were gripping the rails, and his blue eyes were wide, searching the crowd, searching for her. "God," Ella whispered, leaning her head against the hot window. "What have you done?" Dalton, in the front seat, tapped on his console, whistling a tuneless, cheerful song. He was writing his report in his head, a report full of suspicious activity and furtive movements and resisting arrest, a report that would justify every second of her humiliation. The drive to the District D4 precinct on Harrison Avenue was a silent, suffocating blur. The city Ella knew, the city of brownstone charm, of intellectual bustle, of her hard-won dreams, had vanished. In its place was a hostile landscape, seen through the reinforced finger-smudged glass of a police cruiser. Every person on the sidewalk seemed to be staring at her, their faces accusing. Officer Dalton, for his part, was infuriatingly casual. He made a call to dispatch, his voice a flat, professional monotone that was somehow more insulting than his earlier aggression. "Yeah, female suspect in custody. Charges larceny from a person over 65 and possession of a Class E substance. Yeah, the beta blocker. Victim's name is unknown, just Ryan. He's en route to Mass General for a psych eval. Seems confused." Seems confused. The words were a hammer blow. Dalton had taken Ryan's one vulnerability and twisted it into the primary evidence against her. If Ryan was confused, he was an unreliable witness. If he was an unreliable witness, her story didn't matter. It was just her word, the word of a young, black felon against his. The precinct was a bureaucratic maze of dull beige walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed, and the smell of industrial cleaner and burnt coffee. Ella was processed with a cold, impersonal efficiency that was its own kind of violence. "Name?" the desk sergeant grunted, not looking up from his computer. "Ella Blackwell." "Date of birth?" "August 12th, 2003. "Ever been arrested?" "No, never." "Mm-hmm." The sergeant typed, the sound of the keys a flat, uncaring rhythm. "Empty your pockets, belt off, shoes off." They took her shoelaces. They took the simple silver chain her mother had given her for high school graduation. They took her dignity, piece by piece. She was fingerprinted, the black ink feeling like a permanent stain. She was photographed, the flash bright and accusing, capturing her tear-streaked face for a future she couldn't even imagine. "You get one phone call," the sergeant said, pointing to a metal-cased phone on the wall. Her mind raced. Who to call? Her mother? The call would send her into a panic, and she was 6 hours away in New York. Her roommate, Sarah? What could Sarah do? She was a sophomore art student. Ella thought of the UMass Boston Legal Aid Clinic. She'd seen a flyer for it. She called the number. An answering machine picked up. "Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It was 5:30 p.m. on a Friday. A cold, hollow despair opened up in her stomach. She hung up the phone. "No one to call?" Dalton asked. He'd been lingering, watching her, a small, satisfied smirk on his face. "Guess you'll be staying with us for the weekend. You'll see a judge on Monday." "I am a nursing student," Ella said, her voice shaking but hard. "I have exams on Monday. You have my ID. You have my textbooks. You have my stethoscope in that pile of my belongings. What about any of that says felon to you?" "You'd be surprised," Dalton said, shrugging. "Smart ones are the most dangerous. They think they can get away with it." He nodded to another officer. "Put her in holding." The holding cell was a concrete box with a metal bench. It was freezing. Another woman was curled up in the corner, sleeping or passed out. It was hard to tell. Ella sat as far away as possible, wrapping her arms around herself. This was it. This was how it happened. This was the story her father used to tell, in a low, bitter voice, late at night when he thought she was asleep. He'd been a foreman at a shipping warehouse. A pallet of electronics went missing. He was the only black foreman on his shift. He was questioned. He was fired. They found the real thieves a month later. 2 white forklift operators. But his job was already gone. His reputation was gone. "They don't need proof, Ella Bean," he'd told her, his voice rough. "They just need a reason that feels right. And to them, we always feel right." He'd died of a heart attack 2 years later, his health insurance gone, his spirit broken. Ella was in this program, studying to save people because of him. And now his history was repeating itself. She thought of Ryan, alone in a hospital, scared, confused, calling for Clara. He was the victim here, but not of her. He was a victim of the same blunt, stupid instrument of a system that was currently crushing her. He was a victim of Officer Dalton's need for a simple story, a story with a clear hero and a clear villain. Hours passed. The sky outside the one high, barred window turned from blue to purple to black. The precinct sounds morphed. Shouting, laughter, the slam of metal doors. She was invisible. A piece of inventory. Ella Blackwell, suspect. She wouldn't cry, she wouldn't. She'd held it together in the garden. She'd held it together during processing. She would not break in this cell. She closed her eyes and began to recite, under her breath, the brachial plexus nerve roots. Radial, musculocutaneous, ulnar, median. She focused on the cold, hard facts of the human body, a system that, unlike this one, followed rules. She didn't know how long she'd been sitting there when she heard the commotion. It was a new sound, not the usual precinct noise, but the sound of quiet. A sudden, heavy silence, as if someone had sucked all the air out of the building. Then a new voice, a woman's. Not loud, but it cut through the building like a diamond. "I am here for Ella Blackwell. You will release her to my custody immediately." The silence that fell over the D4 precinct was absolute. It was the kind of stunned, oxygen-sucking quiet that follows a lightning strike. The desk sergeant, who had been loudly complaining about the Red Sox, froze with a half-eaten donut in his hand. Into this silence walked Nora Steele. She was perhaps 5'5", but she seemed to command the space of a woman twice her size. She wore a charcoal gray suit that was so perfectly tailored it looked less like clothing and more like elegant, minimalist armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, behind sharp rectangular glasses, missed nothing. She carried a slim, black leather briefcase. Flanking her, 2 steps behind, were 2 men. And behind them, 2 more. They were not police officers. They were built like refrigerators, dressed in dark, identical suits, with earpieces that were clearly not for listening to music. Their presence was an overwhelming statement of physical and financial power. Nora Steele walked to the center of the room and placed her briefcase on the floor. She did not approach the high desk. She waited for the desk to, in essence, come to her. The desk sergeant, wiping his mouth, finally found his voice. Ma'am, this is a restricted area. Visiting hours are—" "I'm not visiting," Nora Steele said. Her voice was calm, pitched just loud as it needed to be. "I am Nora Steele, partner at Ropes & Gray, 800 Boylston Street. I am primary counsel for Mr. Ryan Hawthorne. You are currently holding his personal health advocate, Ms. Ella Blackwell, on fabricated charges. You have 10 minutes to bring her to me, with her property, before I call the mayor, the police commissioner, and the attorney general. Your choice." The name Ropes & Gray landed with a heavy thud. It was one of the oldest, most powerful law firms in the city. But it was the second name that caused the sergeant to turn pale. "Hawthorne? Did you say Ryan Hawthorne?" "I did," Nora said. "As in Hawthorne Industries?" Nora simply stared at him. The sergeant scrambled for his phone, fumbling the receiver. "Captain? Yeah, you need to come down here, now." Officer Cole Dalton chose that exact moment to walk out of the break room, laughing at a joke, a styrofoam cup in his hand. He saw the phalanx of suits and his laughter died. "What's all this?" "Are you Officer Cole Dalton?" Nora Steele asked. Her voice was suddenly arctic. "I am," Dalton said, puffing up his chest, his authority returning. "Who are you?" "I'm the woman who is going to end your career," Nora said, not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. "You arrested Ella Blackwell." "That's right. Caught her red-handed. Robbery, possession." "You," Nora interrupted, taking a single step toward him, "assaulted a private citizen. You illegally detained a designated healthcare proxy for a client who is currently in the care of Mass General. You have triggered a chain of events that will cost this city millions of dollars. But your problem," she said, her voice dropping, "is that you personally, civilly, laid your hands on my client. And Mr. Hawthorne is displeased." Dalton's face had gone from red to a pasty white. "Client? The old man? He's a confused—" "The old man you are referring to," Nora cut in, "is Ryan Hawthorne, founder and CEO of Hawthorne Industries, and one of the most powerful men in this state. The confused state you observed was a medical event, exacerbated by you. And the possession charge? That was his prescribed medication, which Ms. Blackwell, a nursing student, was rightfully returning to him. We have her on retainer as a medical consultant." The last part was a lie, a brilliant, preemptive legal shield, but Dalton didn't know that. All he knew was that the simple, clean story of hero cop saves old man had just exploded in his face. The captain, a weary-looking man with graying hair, burst from his office. "What in God's name is going on?" Nora Steele simply handed him her card. "Captain, as I was just telling your desk sergeant, you have approximately 6 minutes to bring Ms. Ella Blackwell to me." "Get her," the captain barked at the sergeant. "Now, and get her property." "But Captain," Dalton sputtered, "the report—" "Shut up, Dalton," the captain roared. "Go to my office. Do not say another word." Dalton, his face a mask of disbelief and terror, stumbled away. A few minutes later, a different officer, a woman, led Ella out from the holding area. Ella was blinking in the bright fluorescent light, her shoelaces in her hand, her hair messy. She looked exhausted, small, and utterly confused. She saw the suits, she saw the 4 huge bodyguards, and she saw Nora Steele, who gave her a look that was not unkind. "Ms. Blackwell?" Nora said, her voice softening by a fraction. "Yes?" Ella whispered, her heart pounding. Who are you?" "Did the legal aid clinic—" "No, Ms. Blackwell, I'm Nora Steele. I work for Ryan Hawthorne." She stepped forward and, in a gesture that stunned every cop in the room, gently took the shoelaces from Ella's hand and knelt. "Let's get these back on you. We're leaving." Ella was too shocked to speak. This immaculate, powerful woman was kneeling at her feet, tying her sneakers. "My property," Ella finally managed to say, finding her voice. "It's here," Nora said, standing up. She took the large plastic bag from the sergeant, the bag containing Ella's phone, her wallet, her textbook, her stethoscope. She unzipped her briefcase, pulled out a velvet pouch, and began transferring Ella's items, wiping each one clean of fingerprint ink with a cloth. She zipped the pouch and handed it to Ella. "This," Nora said, "is how your property should be treated." She turned to the captain. "We are leaving. You will be hearing from my office by 8 a.m. Monday. I expect Officer Dalton's badge and service weapon to be on your desk when you file your report." The captain just nodded, his face grim. Nora put a hand on Ella's back. "This way." The 4 bodyguards moved as 1, 2 in front, 2 behind, creating a human shield. They walked out of the precinct, leaving a wake of absolute, terrified silence. The heavy glass doors closed behind them, and the sounds of the city returned. But they seemed different now, muffled. A black, shining Cadillac Escalade was parked in a no-parking zone right by the entrance. One of the bodyguards opened the back door. The interior was vast, smelling of rich leather and quiet power. Ella slid in, her mind reeling. Nora got in opposite her. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing them in complete silence. "Where are we going?" Ella asked, her voice small. "Massachusetts General Hospital," Nora said, buckling her seatbelt. "Ryan is asking for you. He's distressed. He won't let the doctors near him." Ella's head was spinning. "Ryan Hawthorne? Hawthorne Industries? The building? The Hawthorne building?" "The very same," Nora said. "But he was on a bench. I bought him scones. He never had any money." "He's worth an estimated $40 billion, Miss Blackwell," Nora said, a small, tired sigh escaping her. "But a year ago, his wife, Clara, passed away. He hasn't been the same. He's been walking. He dismisses his security detail. He gets lost in his grief. Your Ryan on the bench is a man drowning, and you, apparently, were the first person to throw him a life raft. He's been talking about Clara's kind friend in the garden for weeks. We've been trying to find you." "So, he is confused," Ella said. "Yes and no," Nora said. "He has moments, but he's not incapacitated, and he's very, very clear about who he trusts. Right now, that list has one name on it. Yours." Ella looked down at her hands, still red and chafed from the handcuffs. She thought of the cold cell. She thought of Dalton's sneer. "That police officer—" "Officer Dalton," Nora said, her voice turning to steel again, "made the catastrophic mistake of putting his bigotry on public display. He assumed you were a predator. He assumed Mr. Hawthorne was a victim. The irony is, he was the only predator in that garden today, and you were both his victims." The car was speeding silently through the city, a black bubble of impossible wealth. Ella finally let out the breath she felt she'd been holding for hours. The tears came again, but this time they weren't for shame. They were for the sheer, terrifying, random injustice of it all, and for the equally random, terrifying power that had just, in a flash, saved her. The emergency room at Mass General was a world of frantic, organized chaos. Nurses in scrubs power-walked the hallways, doctors shouted orders, and the air was thick with the smells of antiseptic and human suffering. But Ella and her entourage didn't stop there. One of the bodyguards spoke quietly into his wrist, and a side door marked "Staff Only" buzzed open. They were led through a labyrinth of quiet, sterile corridors into a private elevator. Nora used a keycard, and the elevator began to rise, smoothly and silently. "Where are we?" Ella asked. "The Lunder building," Nora replied. "But this is the private wing, the Hawthorne wing, in fact. Ryan funded it." Of course he did. The doors opened onto a space that looked more like a Four Seasons hotel than a hospital. The floors were polished marble, the lighting was recessed and warm, and the air smelled faintly of lemon and tea. A team of people in crisp suits and white coats was waiting for them, their faces etched with anxiety. "Miss Steele, thank God," a man with a Chief of Medicine badge said, rushing forward. "He's barricaded himself in the room. He's thrown a tray. He won't let anyone touch him. He keeps demanding we find Clara." "This," Nora said, gesturing to Ella, "is the woman he's been asking for. This is Ella Blackwell." The Chief of Medicine looked at Ella, his gaze sweeping over her rumpled clothes, her red-rimmed eyes. There was a flicker of the same doubt Ella had seen in Officer Dalton's face. This is who the billionaire was demanding? "Ms. Blackwell," the doctor said, his tone skeptical. We have him on a standard. Is he stable? Ella interrupted. Her voice was quiet, but it wasn't the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a nursing student. It was the voice of a professional. The doctor blinked, taken aback. His vitals are erratic. His blood pressure is high, tachycardia, but it's self-induced. He's in a state of extreme agitation. We think the incident in the park was a significant stressor. We want to sedate him. No, Ella said. Don't sedate him. Not yet. Let me talk to him. What room? He's in 1001. But Miss Blackwell, he's not himself. He's strong, and he's scared. He's scared, Ella agreed. And you are all strangers. Let me go in, alone. Absolutely not, one of the bodyguards said. Miss Steele, that's a security. Let her, Nora said, holding up a hand. She knows him. We don't. She looked at Ella. Are you sure? Ella nodded. She handed the velvet pouch to Nora. Hold this. She walked to the heavy wooden door of room 101. She could hear him inside, muttering, Get away! Get away! Find Clara! She took a deep breath. She wasn't the victim from the park anymore. She wasn't the prisoner from the cell. She was a caregiver. This was her sim lab. She knocked softly. Ryan, it's Ella, the girl from the park. I'm here. The muttering stopped. Ella, is that you? Is it a trick? It's not a trick, Ryan. It's me. I'm right outside the door. Can I come in? There was a long pause. Then the sound of something heavy, a chair, being dragged away from the door. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Ryan Hawthorne's clear blue eye, wild and terrified, peered out. He looked smaller than he had on the bench, swallowed by a plush hospital gown. Ella? He whispered. Hey, Ryan. She gave him a small, soft smile. I'm here. You're safe. But you're making a real mess in there, huh? He opened the door. The room was beautiful, with a sweeping view of the Charles River, but it was in disarray. A food tray was overturned. Sheets were pulled from the bed. They took you, he said, his voice breaking. That man, he hurt you. That man was wrong, Ryan, Ella said, stepping inside. She closed the door, shutting out the anxious faces of the doctors and lawyers. She was alone with him. He was a bully, and he was wrong. I'm okay, see? She held out her hands, which were still red. He looked at her wrists, and his face crumpled. He did hurt you. It's just a scratch, she lied. But Ryan, look at me. I'm here. I'm safe. And so are you. I don't know where I am. You're at Mass General. You were just a little overwhelmed, so they brought you here to rest. She gently guided him to the one chair that wasn't overturned. Can I? She gestured to the blood pressure cuff on the table. He nodded, still watching her face. Ella's hands were steady. She wrapped the cuff around his arm, her movements practiced and sure. She put her stethoscope in her ears. Her stethoscope, the one Dalton had thrown on the ground, and inflated the cuff. She watched the dial, listening. 160/95. Pulse 110. Too high. Okay, Ryan, she said, removing the cuff. You're pretty worked up. We need to get that heart rate down. Remember how we breathe in the park? I don't... In through your nose, she said, holding his frail hand. Count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Hold it. Now out through your mouth. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They sat there for 10 minutes. Just breathing. The team outside the door must have been going crazy, but Ella didn't care. She was focused on her patient. The frantic energy in the room began to dissipate. Ryan's breathing slowed. The wild, hunted look in his eyes began to fade, replaced by his more familiar, gentle confusion. That's better, she said, taking his pulse again at the wrist. 85. Better. You remind me of Clara, he whispered. She was always so calm. When the world was loud, she was the quiet. That's a lovely thing to say, Ryan. They wanted to hurt me, he said, a tear rolling down his cheek. They wanted to put needles in me. They were just trying to help, Ella said gently. They were scared because you were scared. They're not going to hurt you. I won't let them. You won't? I won't. I promise. There was a soft knock. Ms. Blackwell? It was Nora's voice. It's okay, Ella called. You can come in, just one at a time. Nora entered, followed by the chief of medicine. They both stopped, stunned. Ryan was sitting calmly in his chair, holding Ella's hand. The room was an oasis of peace. Well, the doctor said, his voice full of disbelief. That's remarkable. Ms. Blackwell, your technique. It's just breathing, doctor, Ella said, standing. He doesn't need a sedative. He needs a friendly face, and he needs his metoprolol, which Officer Dalton confiscated as evidence. Nora Steele's face darkened. I'll have it sent from his home immediately. Doctor, get him his medication. Of course, the doctor said, scrambling. Nora turned to Ella. Ms. Blackwell, Ella, Mr. Hawthorne would like to offer you a position. Ella looked at her, then at Ryan, who was watching her with trusting, hopeful eyes. A job, Ella said. He needs a companion, a health advocate, someone who, as he put it, understands the quiet. Your nursing school tuition, all of it, will be covered. You will be given a residence at his home in Brookline. Your starting salary. Nora named a figure that was so high, Ella thought she'd misheard. Will be effective as of 3 weeks ago. Ella's mind reeled. This was life-changing. This was an escape from debt, from the tiny apartment, from the double shifts. This was a dream. But as she looked at Nora's expectant face and Ryan's hopeful one, she thought of the holding cell. She thought of Dalton's sneer. She thought of the click of the handcuffs. I need to think, Ella said. I'm a nursing student. I have a life. This is a lot. Of course, Nora said. But before I decide anything, Ella said, her spine straightening, we have to do something. Anything, Nora said. I want to see Officer Dalton, and I want him to answer for what he did. A slow, wolfish smile spread across Nora Steele's face. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already convened a meeting for Monday morning. The police commissioner, the mayor's chief of staff, and the head of the Internal Affairs Division. They think they're meeting with me to discuss a settlement. She paused, looking at Ella with newfound respect. They're going to be very, very surprised when they find out they're meeting with you. Monday morning did not find Ella Blackwell in a lecture hall. It found her in the passenger seat of the same black Escalade, speeding silently toward City Hall. She was not wearing her nursing scrubs or her cafe apron. Nora Steele had, with surprising gentleness, taken her to a high-end boutique on Newberry Street on Saturday. Mr. Hawthorne insists, she'd said. Appearance is a form of armor, Ella. Today you need to be impenetrable. Ella now wore a deep navy blue sheath dress, a structured blazer, and low, sensible heels. Her hair was pulled back, her face was clear, and her hands, which she'd meticulously manicured, were steady. She looked, she thought, like her own mother. Powerful, dignified, and not to be trifled with. The only remnant of the old Ella was the stethoscope in her new leather satchel, a reminder of who she was. They bypassed the public entrance of City Hall, of course. A bodyguard led them through a private staff entrance, up a service elevator, and into the mayor's wing. The air here was different, thick with old wood, old money, and an hushed, anxious importance. The conference room was imposing. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the grim faces of the men already seated. Ella recognized the police commissioner from TV. Beside him sat a stern-faced man, the head of internal affairs. And next to him, looking exhausted, was the D4 captain. At the far end of the table, looking small and pale, was Officer Cole Dalton. He was in his dress uniform, but he sat next to a man in a rumpled suit, his union representative. When Ella and Nora walked in, the room went silent. The commissioner stood, a politician's smile plastered on his face. "Ms. Steele, thank you for coming. I'm Commissioner Davies. I want to assure you, we are taking this—" "You will address my client, Commissioner," Nora said, pulling out a chair for Ella at the head of the table, directly opposite Dalton. Nora sat beside her, opening her briefcase. The commissioner's smile faltered. He looked at Ella. "Ms. Blackwell, I am deeply sorry for the misunderstanding in the garden. Officer Dalton is a 12-year veteran, a good officer. He made a judgment error." "A judgment error," Ella repeated. Her voice was calm, and it carried perfectly in the quiet room. "Is that what you call it?" "He was following protocol for a suspected situation," the union rep chimed in. "A suspected situation," Ella said, turning her gaze on him. "What situation exactly was suspected? Let's be specific." "The officer," the rep said, shuffling his papers, "received a call about a young woman harassing an elderly man." "A call?" Nora interrupted, her voice sharp. "From whom?" "We've subpoenaed the 911 logs. There was no call. Officer Dalton initiated the contact himself. He was the call." The room went cold. The commissioner shot a venomous look at Dalton. "Is this true, officer?" Dalton stared at the table. I saw what I saw. It looked suspicious." "What looked suspicious?" Ella asked, leaning forward. "Please, describe me." Dalton was sweating. You were handing him something. It was furtive." "Furtive," Ella said. "I was handing my friend his heart medication, which he had dropped. I was in my work uniform, from a cafe 2 blocks away. I had my nursing textbooks in my bag." "What about that, Officer Dalton? Was furtive?" He was calling you Clara. He was clearly distressed. You were taking advantage. He was calling me Clara because his wife of 50 years, Clara Hawthorne, passed away a year ago," Ella said, her voice cutting through his. "He was distressed because a strange man with a gun," she pointed at Dalton, "started yelling at me. You didn't de-escalate a situation, officer. You were the situation." She looked at the commissioner. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't ask for my name. He didn't ask for my ID. He accused. He assaulted. He grabbed my arm. He emptied my personal belongings onto the ground for a crowd to see. He handcuffed me. He put me in a cell, and he accused me of a felony. A felony, Commissioner, that would have ended my nursing career before it began. This wasn't a judgment error. This was malpractice, fueled by bigotry. "Now let's not throw words like that around," the union rep started. "Bigotry," Ella repeated, her voice like steel. "He saw a young black woman and an old white man, and his brain filled in a racist, sexist narrative of a predator and a victim. He didn't see a person. He didn't see a student. He didn't see a caregiver. He saw a stereotype, and he acted on it." Nora Steele slid a tablet across the table. "Play it." The union rep tapped the screen. A video filled the silence. It was from the crowd. It was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. Video Dalton. "What did you take from him? His wallet?" Video Ella. "Officer, I'm his friend. I'm a nursing student. His name is Ryan." Video Dalton. "Stealing prescription meds from an old man. That's a new low. Tell it to the judge." Video Ryan in the background. "Clara, don't leave me." Nora stopped the video. "We have," she said. 17 more of these, from every angle. We also have Ms. Blackwell's UMass transcripts. She's a 4.0 student. We have her employment record from the Gilded Bean. Perfect. And we have a 2-page, single-spaced, and extremely lucid statement from Ryan Hawthorne, dictated this morning, detailing his friendship with Ms. Blackwell and the terror he felt watching Officer Dalton assault his friend. He is also, she added, demanding the city formally investigate the inhumane way he was strapped to a gurney and taken to a hospital he owns. The commissioner's face was ashen. He looked at Dalton with pure loathing. "Cole," the union rep said, his voice low. "You told me he was an incoherent homeless man. You said the girl had no ID. You said—" I was under pressure," Dalton sputtered. "I had to make a call." "You made the wrong one," the captain said, his voice full of gravel. "You embarrassed this department. You embarrassed this city. You put your hands on a private citizen without cause." "So," Nora said, "here is what's going to happen." She slid a file across the table. "This is a civil rights lawsuit. Hawthorne and Blackwell versus the City of Boston and Officer Cole Dalton. It's for a substantial sum. We filed it an hour ago. It's already been picked up by the Globe and the AP." The commissioner's head snapped up. "You filed? I thought this was a negotiation." "I don't negotiate with bullies, Commissioner," Nora said. "However, Mr. Hawthorne is a philanthropist. He believes in teachable moments." She looked at Ella. It was her cue. "I don't want your money," Ella said, and every man at the table froze. "I mean, you will pay my legal fees, and you will pay a settlement, but that's not what I want. The settlement money," she looked at Nora, who nodded, "will be used to fund a new initiative." "An initiative?" the commissioner asked, his voice wary. "The Blackwell-Hawthorne Initiative for Community-Based De-Escalation," Ella said, the name rolling off her tongue. She'd practiced it all weekend. "It will be a mandatory training program for all BPD officers, not a one-day seminar, a semester-long course taught by community leaders, social workers, and," she smiled, "nurses, because we are trained to de-escalate without a weapon. We are trained to see a person in distress and listen." That's a significant request, Ms. Blackwell," the commissioner stammered. "It's not a request," Nora said. "It's the alternative to a lawsuit that will follow your city and you, Commissioner, for the rest of your careers. You will publicly fire Officer Dalton for cause. You will issue a formal apology to Ms. Blackwell and Mr. Hawthorne, and you will fund this initiative. Do we have an agreement?" All eyes turned to Cole Dalton. His face was a ruin. His career, his reputation, his 12-year veteran status. All gone in an instant. The union rep, seeing the tidal wave of evidence, slowly closed his briefcase. He said nothing. He didn't have to. "Officer Dalton," the commissioner said, his voice dead. "You are suspended pending termination. Hand over your badge." Dalton looked at Ella, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading hatred. He had been the hero. How did he become the villain? Ella met his gaze. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel joy. She just felt a profound, cold, and necessary sense of justice. She felt the weight of her father's misunderstanding finally begin to lift. She stood up. "I have to get to a class. My lawyer will handle the details." She turned and walked out of the room, her heels clicking with calm, undeniable authority on the polished mahogany floor. The Boston Globe story hit the front page the next morning, digital and print. The headline was explosive. "BPD officer fired. Billionaire's caregiver falsely arrested in public garden. Hawthorne, city announced sweeping bias training initiative." The story was brutal. It had quotes from Nora. It had a heavily redacted portion of Ryan's statement. It had a bystander's cell phone video embedded. And it had a photo of Ella, not the tear-streaked mugshot, but a professional, dignified photo Nora had commissioned over the weekend. In it, Ella looked exactly like what she was: a future healthcare professional, intelligent, poised, and powerful. The city exploded. Officer Cole Dalton became, overnight, the face of racial bias in the BPD. The police union made a few weak statements about due process, but they were drowned out by the public, by politicians, and by the sheer, undeniable evidence of the videos. Dalton was a pariah. He was fired, and Nora's office made it clear that if he ever sought employment in law enforcement again, anywhere, they would send his personnel file ahead of him. He was, professionally, finished. The D4 precinct was in chaos. The captain was demoted. The desk sergeant was reassigned. The entire culture of the office was under a microscope. But Ella knew that firing one man wasn't change. It was just a symptom. The initiative was the change. She'd accepted Ryan's offer, but on her terms. "I'm not your companion, Ryan," she'd told him gently, back in his hospital room, which was now filled with flowers and apologetic doctors. "I'm your health advocate, and I'm your friend, but I am not your employee. I am a consultant." "A consultant," Ryan had said, tasting the word. "I like that. Sounds expensive." "I am," Ella smiled. "But my terms are that I finish my degree. I live in my own apartment, not on your estate. You can pay my tuition, and you can pay my consulting fee. But my life remains my own." "Deal," Ryan had said, gripping her hand. "Now, can we go to the park?" "Not yet," she'd laughed. "Your blood pressure is still high." Nora Steele, for her part, had been ecstatic. "A consultant," she'd boomed, clicking her pen. "Brilliant. It creates a professional boundary. It protects you from his family if they ever get litigious, and it makes you an independent contractor. Ella, you're a natural." The Blackwell-Hawthorne Initiative was not just a press release. With the full, ferocious backing of Ryan Hawthorne's billions and Nora Steele's legal team, it became a reality with terrifying speed. Ella, between her classes and her consulting visits with Ryan, found herself in boardrooms, helping design the curriculum. "They need to understand," she told the panel of academics and social workers, "that not every situation requires a suspect and an officer. Sometimes it's just people. They need to learn to talk, to ask, 'Are you okay? Do you need help?' Not hands where I can see them." She brought in her nursing professors. They taught modules on approaching confused patients, geriatric or otherwise. They taught verbal de-escalation, active listening, and how to read body language not as suspicious, but as anxious or scared. Ella herself led the final module. She stood in front of the first cohort of 20 police officers, all of them looking resentful and bored. "I'm Ella Blackwell," she said, her voice quiet. "3 weeks ago, one of your colleagues threw me on the ground, handcuffed me, and called me a felon. He did it because he saw my face and my age, and he made an assumption. My goal is to make sure you never do that. My goal is to teach you to see a human being, not a stereotype." By the end of the session, they weren't bored. They were silent, thoughtful. She'd shown them her torn backpack. She'd shown them her stained textbook, and she'd shown them her mugshot, projected on the large screen. "This," she said, "is what a judgment error looks like. This is what you're taking from someone." The ripple effects spread. The initiative became a national model. Other cities, facing their own lawsuits, called Nora Steele's office. "Tell us about this Blackwell-Hawthorne thing." Ella became, reluctantly, a public figure. Not a celebrity, but a symbol. She was the UMass nurse. She gave one, and only one, interview to the Globe. "I'm not an activist," she'd said, her words careful. "I'm a nurse. My job is to care for people, all people. I just wish, on that day, Officer Dalton had felt the same." It was 6 months later. A bright, cool autumn day. The leaves in the public garden were a riot of red and gold. The air smelled of wood smoke and crisp apples. Ella Blackwell, RN, walked along the path by the lagoon. She'd passed her boards with flying colors. The ink on her nursing license was barely dry. She wore jeans, a warm sweater, and her favorite boots. In her bag, she still had a stethoscope, but now it was a top-of-the-line Littmann, a graduation gift from Ryan. She found him on their bench. He looked transformed. He was still frail, but he was no longer lost. He wore a crisp, new cashmere coat. His silver hair was neatly combed. He was clean-shaven. And he was not alone. Sitting a discreet 50 yards away, on 2 other benches, were 4 men. They were in plain clothes, but their posture, their alert, scanning eyes, and their subtle earpieces gave them away. They were Ryan's new security detail, hand-picked by Nora Steele. "You're late," Ryan said, not looking up. He was reading a book of poetry. "I was at the hospital," Ella said, sitting beside him. "Rounds, and I'm not late. You're early." Details. He closed the book, a finger marking his page. "How is the initiative?" "It's good," Ella said, stretching. "We graduated our 3rd cohort of officers. I think it's working. A little. They're starting to listen." "Good." He looked out at the water. Clara would have liked that. She was a listener. "I know, Ryan. You've told me." He turned and looked at her, his blue eyes clear and sharp. The fog of grief and confusion was still there some days, but today was a good day. "I know I have, but I like to say it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Ryan, no," Ella said, laughing. "You are not proposing. We talked about this." "Oh, hush," he grumbled, swatting her hand. "It's not that. It's a graduation present." She opened it. Inside, resting on black velvet, was an antique watch. It was a woman's watch, gold, with a simple, elegant face. It was beautiful. "Ryan, I can't accept this." "It was Clara's," he said quietly. "It was her daily watch, not the fancy one, the one she wore when she was in the garden. She said it was the only one that ever kept the right time." Ella's breath caught. "She would want you to have it," Ryan said. She would have been so proud of you, Ella. You saved me." "I didn't save you, Ryan," Ella said, her voice thick. "We saved each other." "Perhaps," he smiled. "Now put it on. And did you bring me a scone?" Ella laughed, pulling a small paper bag from her satchel. "You're a billionaire. You can't buy your own scone?" "They don't taste the same," he said, taking it. "The gilded bean, still the best." A young police officer, a woman, walked by. She was new, her uniform still stiff. She saw them, a young black woman and an old white man, sitting close together on a bench. She saw the 4 large men nearby. She saw the expensive coat on the man, the elegant watch on the woman's wrist. She paused. Her training kicked in. She saw nothing. Just 2 people enjoying the park. "Afternoon," the officer said, tipping her head with a polite smile. "Afternoon, officer," Ella replied, smiling back. The officer walked on. Ella and Ryan sat in the comfortable, peaceful silence, eating their scone, as the swan boats drifted by on the lagoon. What began as a moment of profound public injustice, fueled by prejudice, was transformed into a powerful catalyst for change. Ella Blackwell, a nursing student who only wanted to show kindness, found herself at the center of a city-wide reckoning. By reclaiming her power, not with anger, but with calm authority and undeniable truth, she did more than clear her name. She, along with Ryan Hawthorne's resources, forced an entire system to look in the mirror. Officer Dalton's life was a footnote, a consequence of his own bias. But the Blackwell-Hawthorne Initiative became a lasting legacy, changing how police in Boston would see their community, one hello at a time. We hope you enjoyed this powerful story. If you were moved by Ella's journey, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and transformation. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update.